Hello and welcome to TheLines.com 2024 NFL preview. Each and every team, our breakdown, any bets we have in our accounts, any bets we are leaning towards, anything that we are seeing with any of these teams as we head into the regular season. Matt Brown, Stephen Andress coming to you guys. Everything we do absolutely free, so go ahead, hit the subscribe button. You're going to get every single one of these things that we do. Today we talked the Detroit Lions, a team that I am in love with. I have a love affair with this Lions team. You will get that over the course of this video. I see Stephen giggling over there because he knows my love affair that I have with.
We talking like quadruple espresso shot, Dan Campbell special love affair here?
I mean, you know, tons and tons of love for this team that is the favorite to win their division, one of the favorites in the NFC as well. You mentioned Dan Campbell, Stephen. Dan Campbell back for his third year. Ben Johnson does stay at offensive coordinator, which I think is a pretty big offseason acquisition, even though it's just a retention type deal, because he was a very hot name out there in the coaching market, and they were able to retain him on the offensive coordinator side of things. Aaron Glenn back on the defensive coordinator side of things. Guys, this is a team that was 12-5 last year, went out in the draft. The one problem for them was pass coverage. And what did they do? They used their first-round pick on Terrion Arnold out of Alabama, a corner. They used their second-round pick on a corner. They, in free agency, they traded for Carlton Davis, and they also went and signed another corner in free agency as well. Stephen, this is something, a big priority for this team. Obviously, they know the offense is there. The defense was something they were looking at. DJ Reader gets signed on the defensive line. Marcus Davenport on the defensive line. Now, they did have one defection on the offensive line, but they signed Kevin Zeitler, another guy that is a pretty good offensive guard out there. They used a fourth-round pick on a tackle. Used a fourth-round pick on a safety as well. No real, Steve, you start to break this team down like last year, and you see Jared Goff stayed healthy. Amon-Ra St. Brown became a superstar, and you had two rookies that were really, really integral in making this offense go, and Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta. Obviously, both of those guys back in year two. You get Jameson Williams with the first entire offseason of training camp. Guys, if you remember, sure, this is year three for Jameson Williams, but it's kind of like year one. He was hurt year one. He was suspended year two. So here he is in year three, finally getting to participate with this team, top to bottom. So, Stephen, you look and what they did in the offseason, I think, is what I really like to see teams do, which is, hey, we understand we have a deficiency on the defensive side of the ball, and so we are basically just going to focus all of our efforts on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. It reminds me when I worked for the Colts, and the GM at the time, Ryan Grigson, used half his draft picks on offensive linemen to try and not let Andrew Luck's kidney get lacerated again. They just take a shotgun approach here, man. The cornerback was clearly their biggest liability. When they did not get pressure, the difference in their defensive DVOA, the difference between pressure versus non-pressure, was top 5 in the league in how good or bad they were. So that's how big of a difference it made, whether they got pressure or not. So if you can get some corners that can hold up in coverage when they don't get pressure, that's a big step forward for this defense. This is a unit where there's a little bit of disagreement on what the secondary is. Sharp has them 20th. PFF has them 11th. I think that is because there's so many new pieces. But to your point, Matt, if they hit, well, now the big Achilles heel of this defense has a big fix. And now you have a well-rounded roster closer to what we saw with previous Super Bowl champions in recent years. You look at the defense, defensive line, top 5 by PFF, number 5 in terms of their front 7 by Sharp. They did have a top 5 pressure rate a year ago. So I think another big question here, it's not as big of a question as the secondary, Matt, but if we can get another pass rusher opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, now we're really cooking. They've taken a shot on Marcus Davenport. He only played 4 games a year ago. He did have 3 previous seasons with PFF with grades that would have been top 40 among edge rushers before that injury-riddled season a year ago. He did also have a top 15 season, would have ranked that if it would have been measured against last year's edge rushers. So you also had DJ Reader in the middle. That's great for your rush defense. He can plug up the middle a little bit. He was top 10 stopping the run for this unit. And so we'll see what happens with this defense. But if the pass rush is even more improved, well, now you can expect or ask less of your secondary as well.
This is not a team that's going to sneak up on anybody. They are fourth in the betting odds to win the Super Bowl. They are only behind the Chiefs, the Niners, the Ravens. Is this Lions team. If you go over into the division and you want to see like, okay, maybe I want to get a piece of them in the NFC North, that number, the best number of that has passed. That being said, still getting plus money out there on this Lions team right now. Best number available out in the market you can find is a plus 135. So again, you're not having to lay money here for this team that, again, we just get news that J.J. McCarthy is going to end up having to have surgery for Minnesota. You have a Green Bay team that, while the upside, I think, is certainly there. Stephen, of course, we'll talk about Green Bay later in a team of its own. That being, we have 1 year of sample size with Jordan Love. That's it. And so, he very well might be awesome, but we literally only have 1 year of sample size for that. And I think that people are just getting a little overhyped about this Bears team. I think the Bears have the potential to be good down the line. It's just a lot to ask of a rookie quarterback and a whole bunch of new pieces to come in and step in and be really, really good in year one. And so I think one of the best divisional values that's still out there is the Lions at plus 135. And so that's a number that is, again, still out there. You can still get. And for a team that's also fourth in the betting odds to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, you don't get that very often in terms of division odds when you're that high up in the Super Bowl market. And obviously you're not alone here. I think the public's in love with this team too. Like we talked at this time last year, can the Lions go from an against the spread darling as an underdog to covering spreads as a favorite a lot of the time? And sure enough, back-to-back years, 12-5 against the spread on close to the closing number there. Nobody has sniffed that total over the past 2 years. So they've leveled up. They maintained that high performance despite higher expectations in the betting market. And now if we look at the schedule a little bit here, Matt, it does get tough. This is the toughest it's been. There are divisions that they have to face, the NFC West and the AFC South. That's pretty tough. The crossover games, Dallas. I might have something wrong here, Matt, so just let me know if I do. Crossover games, I have Dallas, Houston, and Buffalo. So regardless, first place schedule. Here's the key, though, Matt. Only 3 outdoor games on the schedule. Week 9 at Green Bay, which may not be Green Bay winter weather yet. Week 16 at Chicago. Week 17 at San Francisco, where it's usually mild by the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. So that's a big difference because Jared Goff's passer rating drops 10 points in his career from 99 to 89 when he has to play outdoors, and his interception rate is 38% higher when he plays outdoors. So having that many road indoor games to go with their home indoor schedule is a big deal for the Lions. If we look at just projected spreads, they're projected to be 3-point favorite or bigger in 9 games. They're projected to be in toss-up games, inside 3 either way, 7 times this year. And they're only projected to be a bigger than 3-point underdog one time, week 17 at San Francisco, where they're a 4.5-point road underdog, which that's not going to be the number if Brandon Ayuk gets traded. We'll see what happens with that. So all that being said, you win all the games you're supposed to win. That's 9. You split 7 games that are toss-ups, let's just say 3.5. Well, now we're at 12.5, and you could still get over 10.5 at less than minus 130 juice. Yeah. So I think the win total is a little light here, Matt, to be honest with you.
Win total is light. I have the win total. I have an alt win total on this team as well. Stephen, I kind of predict that week 17 game against San Francisco is going to be for the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. That's kind of how I have this season playing out here for this Lions team. As you mentioned, the schedule broke. While it's a tough schedule, the schedule broke almost perfectly for them. As you said, you're not getting Green Bay in the worst of the worst weather in week 9. And then, Chicago away in week 16, probably going to be dealing with super cold temperatures and maybe some nasty stuff going on there. But then the other away game is San Francisco. And outside of that, you are just really rocking and rolling with what this team does best, which is playing in good weather and playing in domes. And so you take a look at this. The last 2 seasons, Stephen, there are, a handful of 4,000-yard passers. I think maybe we kid ourselves a little bit as how easy it is to throw for 4,000 yards these days. There was only 9 guys that did it in 2022. There were only 10 guys that did it in 2023. Jared Goff is one of the 9 from 2022, and he's one of the 10 from 2023. As soon as this offense got those new pieces for him, things have been rocking and rolling there in Detroit. And I said, you keep Ben Johnson, a guy that was on everybody's short list for coaches And him being able to come back, now you get him doing this behind an offensive line that heading into the season, Pro Football Focus has ranked number 1. Sharp Football has ranked number 1. Brandon Thorne from Established Run has ranked number 1. It is across the board consensus the best offensive line in the NFL as we head into the 2024 season as well. I look at this and I have no worry whatsoever about the offense. It really does come down to what they're able to do in shoring up some of those deficiencies on the defensive side of the ball. And like you said, I like the way that you put it, because it's a scatter shot approach. Because here's the thing, you really only have to play 3 corners. Well, you go out and you get 6 of them, and you just need 3 of them to be good, right? And so it's like, hey, I need half of these dudes that I went and got to be good. And so
maybe even just one of them, and you roll coverage over to the other side.
Yeah. And so it's like, I love the approach that they took, which is like, hey, look, we can only put 3 of these dudes on the field at the same time basically anyway. So let's just find out if we can get 3 of the 6 to hit. And if we can get 3 of the 6 to hit, then we're rocking and rolling here. And so I like what they did on the defensive side as well. And then honestly, Jared Goff, I mean, I mentioned the passing totals there for him. I think a lot of people probably didn't realize, just because, there was so much hype around Dan Campbell and so much hype around everything else, that Jared Goff was actually your second highest passing yardage total in the NFL last season. People might not know that he threw for 4,575 yards. He had the 4th highest touchdown total in the NFL last season with 30. He was 3rd in average yards per game at 269. He was 5th in completion percentage at 67%. He was the 5th graded passer by Pro Football Focus of anybody with at least 400 dropbacks. And so I put in a Jared Goff MVP ticket way back when it was 40-1. I was screaming this from a mountaintop. I was beating my fist. I was saying, hey, guys, listen, put this ticket in. This team is going to be good. He doesn't necessarily have to win. We're building a portfolio here. If Jared Goff makes that 40-1 ticket worth, where he gets down to about 5-1, 6-1, we are in a good spot to make a ton of money. And, it's going on and on. Well, it's caught up now, because you're not finding anything close to that with Jared Goff out there for an MVP. That said, I think Dan Campbell is still live in the Coach of the Year market. It's kind of the post-hype sleeper that we talk about sometimes, Stephen, where it's like, hey, last year, everybody, Dan Campbell, and then it didn't come to fruition. If this team wins 13 games, if this team happens to win 14 games, Dan Campbell is going to be in the discussion for Coach of the Year no matter what. And so, again, another guy that you can go out and get at a pretty good number right now.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 ways to win Coach of the Year, right? It's to be the improvement coach, taking like the D'Amico Ryans approach, where he literally was like tied for first place votes last year. So I know he didn't win, but that idea of taking a 3-win team to a division champion, or just being the most dominant team in the league. Like Bill Belichick goes undefeated, he wins Coach of the Year, right? So if Dan Campbell can have a 15-win season or something like that, surely he will be a finalist for the award, if not the favorite to win it. In years past, Matt, I would have come on here and argued with you about Jared Goff MVP. And I know the price is gone that you bet, but still at 25-1, I would have argued that it's a bad bet, because Goff is not going to be able to put up the elite passing numbers that the Patrick Mahomeses and the total offensive production of rushing quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen. I would have argued that immensely. But then last year, we have what I like to call a Heisman voting effect in the NFL MVP, where you and I harped for weeks that Lamar Jackson did not have anywhere near the elite quarterback numbers of other candidates, but his team was the best team. They got the number 1 seed. He beat the other number 1 seed in a primetime game. And all of a sudden, the fact that he was far behind these other quarterbacks statistically didn't matter in the eyes of the voter in a way that I really can't remember over the past 5 years in the NFL. So if Lamar Jackson can win MVP last year with pedestrian passing numbers, then surely Jared Goff has a chance to win MVP if he puts up similar numbers to what he did last year, but gets more wins and has clearly the best team in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, could this be a literally this comes down to that week 17 game with the 49ers? And if Jared Goff goes out there and performs and outdoes a Brock Purdy, in what will certainly be one of the most watched games of the year, that's already a Monday Night Football game as it is anyway, Stephen, like that could be his moment, right? I mean, that could be it. Like, this guy could go out and win the award in week 17, And so I love whenever we have those type of scenarios too, where we can obviously point to a very marquee game in a marquee situation. It doesn't get more marquee than the Super Bowl favorite and on Monday Night Football, so it doesn't get more marquee than that. And certainly if he's able to go out there, perform well, that probably could get it done for him overall. I like the Goff / Dan Campbell combo because it is one of those things where I think you're betting on the upside of this Lions team to where even if Goff, let's say, has an awesome season, Stephen, but like whatever, Burrow or Tua or whatever, whoever, Stroud, whoever it is, just like goes nuclear, right? And nearly throws for 5,000 yards or something. Well, as we just mentioned, you get those 14 wins, like Dan Campbell's going to be right there too. So you're kind of like, it's kind of like a tandem bet on betting on the upside there of this Lions team. So I do like the both of those where maybe if one can't get home just because somebody just does something astronomical, then yeah, there's a chance to kind of get something there as well. Jameson Williams is an interesting case for me this year, and maybe this is more from a fantasy perspective and typically maybe even like, and more as we drill it down even more, maybe from a best ball perspective, Stephen, but it's like, Jameson Williams, again, no training camp year 1, no training camp year 2, finally gets a training camp here. You listen to these beat writers who are like, oh, now we see why this guy was a number 1 wide receiver, right? Like you see these guys that are seeing him in camp going, oh, that is ridiculous speed. Oh, this guy can just toast everybody, and so, maybe he's more of an upside play for a best ball perspective and or whatever, but I think Jameson Williams is one of those guys that maybe is getting slept on a little bit because of how awesome Amon-Ra St. Brown is and how awesome Sam Laporta is. And by the way, they are all awesome. Like they're ridiculously good. But man, Jameson Williams, I watched a ton of him. Obviously, I'm an SEC guy. I watched a ton of him in college. I understood completely why he was the first round pick. And now that he's healthy, with a full training camp under his belt, with the defenses having to pay so much attention to Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta as well, I think we could see some interesting stuff from him.
Listen, I'm a 49ers fan, so I'm going to use a 49ers comp here. Yeah. Look at what Shanahan was able to do with an elite dual threat running back, an elite multi-purpose tight end, and not one, but 2 elite wide receivers. He took the last pick in the draft and made him an MVP candidate. So, like, as our esteemed friend and poker champion Mo Nawara told us, like, it's like playing football on easy mode, right? So we don't know exactly how good Purdy is just because he's got so much around him. We don't exactly know how good Goff is because he's got so much around him. But the Lions haven't had that second great receiver to complete the entire puzzle here. So if Jameson Williams is that, my God, man. Like, we could be looking at the number 1 offense in the NFL, legitimately.
Yeah, I mean, this team, outside of what I've got, I think, on the Falcons, and maybe I'll have to go and tally everything up. I probably have the most liability, actually, to the Lions now, because when you consider that I added Dan Campbell as the head coach of the year. So, I mean, like, I've got, like I said, just to recap where I'm at. I have win total. I have alt win total. I have Jared Goff MVP. I have Dan Campbell coach of the year. I also have them to win the division. I still think that is a gift at plus 135. I am not saying that the Packers are going to be bad. I just don't know if they can be as good as the Lions. Packers very well might get a wild card spot. They very well might be a good team this year. It's just, I think this Lions team is set up to be one of the very best in the NFL. So I have bets all over the place on this team that I still feel good about, to this day, still feel good about overall. And when it's all said and done, I think you're at least going to have one of these tickets that you are able to not only cash, but if it doesn't cash, you're able to monetize.
So here's where I'm at with kind of my Lions portfolio. Still a little light at the moment, but keeping the door open to adding more like you did.
Yeah.
I did not care about the minus 122 juice on over 10.5 wins. Yep. I went straight to the alt win total like you did. I went straight to, I found over 11.5 at plus 180 at Bet365. I went right for that. So I'm on the alt win total on the Lions. As far as potential playoff outcomes, I am still a little nervous about the secondary. They've done all they can to give them the best chance to improve it. I would like to see it first. I also want to do a deeper dive into the Green Bay Packers because they were just as likely to beat the 49ers in the playoffs as the Lions were. They both blew it against the 49ers. So I am not closing the door to potential ceiling outcomes here with the Packers. You mentioned that late game against the Niners might be for the 1 seed for the Detroit Lions. I think week 14 against the Packers might also put one of those teams in the driver's seat for the 1 seed. So I just want to do a little more research on Green Bay, see where I'm at with them, specifically their defense and their schedule as well. And if I find that I'm a little more bearish than I expected on Green Bay, then I'm probably going to be in on some potential playoff outcomes here for the Lions as well.
Yeah, it is. It's a team that if they disappoint, I can promise you it's going to hurt me for sure. It's going to hurt a ton. I mean, listen, we can't bet. We cannot bet based off of injuries. Obviously, all of this is health contingent. It kind of is what it is, right? I mean, this is the NFL. We've been betting this long enough to understand that you're one major injury away from this team having a completely different look, and so I can't see the future. Wish I could. So I'm betting on these guys to stay healthy.
It's August 13th right now. I don't expect it to be an issue, but as we record right now, Jahmyr Gibbs is working through a hamstring injury. Yeah. Probably going to be fine for week 1, but keep an eye on that. Hamstrings obviously have a high re-injury rate, but it's at least the one thing we should monitor right now.
Yeah. The only last thing I'll close with here is I have a minimal, and even though we haven't seen him in the NFL, I do have at least a minimal amount of positive feelings if we have to go without Goff for a game or two. Look, Hendon Hooker has now been he's now over a year removed from that horrible injury. Remember, Hendon Hooker was going to be a first-round pick in the draft until he got that horrible, gruesome injury. He fell to the Lions, who go, this guy's too good for us to let him go any further in the draft. They didn't necessarily need him, but they just took him because this is a gift, right? And so if Hendon Hooker has to come in with those weapons around him, Stephen, and try to win a couple of games while Goff, is recovering from
an
ankle injury or something or whatever it might be, or so, I actually feel okay with that too, which is also something that kind of has me, even further in on this Lions team. I mean, this is a guy, again, it was dominating college football, was going to be a late first round pick in the draft, and then just got injured towards the end of the season, and that all fell apart. But I like that as well, and so even more reason to kind of buy in that even if you have to go a couple games without Goff, that you might be able to still pull out some of these bets.
Still the coaching staff that outproduced when the whole public had no faith in them 2 years ago. Players play hard for this coach no matter who the quarterback is, and if it is a backup for a game or two, this is the number one projected offensive line in the NFL. Perfect situation for a backup to come in and keep the ship afloat.
Guys, if you want to make sure you're getting the best odds on betting the Lions, you got to head over to the Lines. The Lines. Yeah. So if you want to make sure that you are getting the best odds to bet the Lions, you've got to head to TheLines.com, where we have the price comparison tool. You go in, by your state. You can click on, make sure that you're getting the very best number that is available out there so that you're getting your best bang for your buck. And, of course, that's absolutely free over at TheLines.com as well. For Stephen, I am Matt. Good luck on all your Lions bets.